once a film is over, what really sticks in your head is the ending. However, there are those endings that try to be a lot more clever than they actually are. So without any more forced ambiguity, let's talk about those films that people constantly say have confusing, cryptic endings, but actually have pretty simple and obvious solutions. And with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Whatculture, here with 8 ambiguous movie endings that had ridiculously simple solutions. Number 8, 2001: A Space Odyssey. So, what the hell just happened? Well, less an ambiguous ending and more an ambiguous film, Stanley Kubrick's pondering sci-fi still shows off some of the most revered special effects ever to be put to film, despite most of it going over the general audience's head. Even those who can understand the linkage of the monkeys and the purpose of the monoliths tend to lose it when it comes to the film's final act. Dave has successfully shut down the psychopathic/dutiful computer HAL and makes his approach to Jupiter and the newly discovered monolith. When he gets out though, things start getting freaky. Through a desert of colour to an emotionless hotel, Dave ages and then there's a baby. What? Well, the simple solution is just read the book. The real problem here lies in the scene being so often taken out of context of the film or viewers not grasping the overall themes presented in the previous 2 hours. Each section of the film thus far has shown some leap forward, be it the creation of tools, discovery of alien life, or evolution of technology, so it's not hard to take this final scene as such. With Dave slowly changing, it's clear the implication is that he's slowly being transformed into the next level of humanity, just like the apes were at the beginning. This is expanded even further in Arthur C. Clarke's novelization, which was produced in conjunction with the film. It's a cracking read in its own right and provides greater knowledge of the purpose of the monoliths and, more importantly, verifies Dave's forced evolution. Number 7, Lost in Translation. So what did Bill Murray whisper to Scarlett Johansson? Well, this brilliant film ending has been talked about for so long. After becoming close friends with Scarlett Johansson's young Charlotte against the alien backdrop of Tokyo, Bill Murray's Bob is returning to the US, but not before he stops her in the street and whispers something in her ear. But what exactly that is, the audience can't make out. Unless they use computers, because while technically there is no answer because it was never scripted what Bob would whisper, on set the director let Murray improvise the potential line which through all the street noise actually did make its way into the film, and one intrepid fan messed around with the sound enough that you can kind of hear what's being said. So what did he say? I have to be leaving, but I won't let that come between us, okay? Which in all honesty just opens up questions towards their relationship in the future. It's weird because knowing this actually lessens the impact of the film, so yeah. Number 6, In Bruges. Did Ray really die? This film's ending is a perfect culmination of every element of the plot, bringing together seemingly unrelated points in hilariously brilliant fashion. But once all the action has been had, there's one overriding question on our lips. Colin Farrell's childlike assassin, who children certainly don't like, has been the emotional heart of the film, and it's his fate that's left up in the air, as the final scene being a point of view of Ray in an ambulance could go either way. However, the script actually answers it, as the shooting script had an extra scene after what is now the film's end. Zooming out from a newspaper clipping on the shootout, we see Ray alive, but far from well back home in London. Not just removing ambiguity, the scene adds an extra layer of bleakness to the film. Harry's bullet doesn't kill Ray, but in the last moments of the story, his own does. The extra scene isn't overall required for the plot, aside from giving closure to the Ray-Chloe relationship, but you can see why the director went with the less definite solution. Number 5, The Thing. Is the Thing dead? The real terror of The Thing is the lack of knowing. Until you hear that unmistakable screech or see someone's blood fly sky high, there's no way of knowing if you're with a human or an alien of unknown origin. It's a totally formidable foe, which is what makes the ending of John Carpenter's sci-fi horror so terrifying. Kurt Russell's MacReady has seemingly destroyed the monster, but Keith David's Childs has somehow survived. As they share a bottle of whiskey, the audience is left wondering if either one of these men is the Thing from outer space. Well, the solution really is just watch the film. While it's easy to take the material produced in the world of the film after its release as proof, in the comics for example, the Thing survives, and in a 2003 video game we discover in the final level so did MacReady. But while that works as a good if unofficial explanation, you don't really need to look beyond the film for a definitive answer. If the thing is alone with only one human, it will immediately assimilate it. MacReady knows the rest of the team is dead, as would Childs if he was the thing, so the fact that he stays human means that he is. The film's own internal logic solves this one easily. Number 4, Memento. Before he revolutionized Batman, Christopher Nolan was your typical indie upstart. His first film, Following, was just as perplexing as Memento, but seeing as only about 7 people ever saw it, let's look at what he did next. Famously, Memento's end is actually the beginning, showing Guy Pearce's Leonard kill Teddy, giving us a film-long grudge against this smiley character. At the narrative end, aka the chronological middle, we discover that Leonard's quest to hunt down his wife's killer was actually resolved a year ago. With his memory stopping every 5 minutes or so, Leonard has just enough time to decide that he'd prefer to continue his hunt anyway and picks a new target, Teddy. But it doesn't quite add up. Unless you think about it for a minute, and then it actually does make sense. Leonard's chosen a life of vengeance after forgetting the truth of his wife's death because he accidentally killed her with insulin. Whoopsie! He does eventually find his attacker, after which Teddy starts using his friend's quest to help him deal with various bad people. This is essentially what we're seeing in the black and white portion of the film. Watching just the scenes in colour makes sense of this confusing delivery, and it cleverly tricks people into thinking that the film has hidden something from them when it was right there in front of them the whole time. Number 3, Shutter Island. Shutter Island took Scorsese fans by surprise. The king of the gangster movie took his high-end sensibilities and applied it to the typical B-movie format, and brilliance ensued. The film culminates with the disturbing discovery that Leonardo DiCaprio's Teddy wasn't actually the marshal he thought he was, but rather an inmate of the institution on the titular island. The entire plot was a scheme to try and wake Teddy up from his madness, but when they failed to do so, the doctors had no other option but to lobotomize him. But in his last moments, Teddy gives a hint to his doctor that perhaps he's aware of his dangerous nature and is in fact sacrificing himself. The big difference between the film and the book of the same name is the ending. In the novel, Teddy's madness is a lot more clear-cut, but the film's introduction of the closing line, which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man, left many confused. Those involved in production were either tight-lipped or as confused as the rest of us. It was only when The Guardian's David Cox asked James Gilligan, the film's psychiatric advisor, we got a definitive answer. Teddy has indeed been cured, but can't deal with his violent past. Gilligan felt that the film should draw focus to the amount of lobotomies conducted in the 50s and thus didn't have the same desire to keep quiet as the rest of the film's crew. Number 2, Blade Runner. Is Deckard a replicant? There's plenty of clues that point in both directions. In one scene, his eyes go red just like the androids, but others he appears to have been around the department much longer than the standard 5-year lifespan. The specifics vary from version to version, but the film's ending leaves the subplot deviously unresolved. However, the ending really depends on the version of the film you saw, as in the 1992 director's cut, a unicorn was introduced, which shows the director's views on this discussion. Midway through the film, there's a bizarre dream sequence with a unicorn which gets referenced at the end when Deckard finds an origami unicorn left by surly colleague Gaff. It's not difficult to take from this that Gaff is telling both Deckard and the audience that he knows his dreams and by extension, he's a replicant. Number 1, Inception. So is Cobb awake or not? Inception had everything people wanted from a great blockbuster, including some brilliant post-movie conversation. The ending has an unbelievable happy ending, with Leonardo DiCaprio's Dom Cobb succeeding in the Inception and getting back to his kids. But in the final shot, with his totem still spinning, we're left unsure if he'd woken up. A film full of potential clues didn't help. Could he have been asleep from the start or halfway through? And through this all, Christopher Nolan remained as tight-lipped as ever. The simplest solution is that it doesn't really matter, but if you still really care, then just look at his ring. It's something that's travelled around the internet for long enough now that it's no longer a shocking discovery. Cobb's totem wasn't the iconic spinning top, but rather the presence of his wedding ring. It's only on his finger in the dream, and not when he's awake. In the final scene, we clearly see that Cobb is definitely not wearing it. It took a long time for this to be discovered and even longer for it to enter popular knowledge, hence why the ending is still met with an air of ambiguity. As we all know, in the end it didn't matter to Cobb if he was awake or not, but I'll be damned if it wasn't satisfying to finally know the truth.